Well, here we go again. It is officially the start to a brand new year on TheHostProductions, as today for my first video of 2019 I am of course going to be covering the most recent TV episode of Doctor Who as a part possibly of Series 11 featuring the 13th Doctor as played by Jodie Whittaker, written by Chris Chibnall. It is of course the New Year's Day special that is entitled Resolution, featuring the return of the Daleks, which is something that many of the fans have in fact been expecting for quite a while. Of course, the previous review as a part of the Series 11 videos on this channel was of course the series finale, the Battle of Ranskor av Kalos, and it was in fact a review that wasn't necessarily very positive. I think that it would be fair to say that the series finale for this year, or last year even, considering it is 2019 now, was in fact an episode that was not necessarily the best way to end a series of Doctor Who, considering it is a brand new era of the show, and it did seem to be lacking something, so certainly check out that review as well as the other videos so far from Series 11 in order to get my general opinion of the 13th Doctor. However, today's episode review is going to be a little bit different, because for the first time in the 13th Doctor era, we are of course taking a look at an episode that features an enemy that we have seen before, and many times. It is of course Doctor Who's most famous enemy of them all. It is the Daleks, a long inevitability, the return of the Daleks, something of which that has been quite a not necessarily long time coming. The last time we've seen them was of course in the Series 10 opening story, the pilot, and that was very briefly, so it was a cameo, and even then it wasn't a story completely dedicated to them, so it has been quite a fair amount of time since our last Dalek focused Doctor Who story, and it has been a lovely break. And of course this episode, it's nice to see the Daleks returning, it is nice to see the 13th Doctor facing a threat that is an actual threat, which is of course a long-running problem that I've had since Doctor Who Series 11 has had quite a lot of mediocre villains, and this episode, I think it is fair to say, had a lot riding on it. Of course, quite a lot of things have happened since the previous Series 11 episode review of the Battle of Ranskor av Kalos. Of course, a little bit after that episode aired, we did get the information that Series 12 will not be happening in 2019, and we will in fact only be getting Resolution this year for the new series of Doctor Who. And quite a lot of people were kind of disappointed by that, because I think that Series 11, if anything, regardless of the quality of the scripts, it has shown that a brand new era of the show has of course officially started. We've got a brand new Doctor, it is a fresh start for the show, and there has without a doubt been quite a lot of momentum there. The viewing figures have been slowly on the increase with a few parts in the season, and it is fair to say that we've had quite a few nice moments, and it is a shame that we are seeing another year of Doctor Who that is in fact rather quiet. Of course, when it comes to the Doctor Who content perspective, I'm not particularly too bothered, because I'm of course a fan of Doctor Who's external media such as Big Finish and the books, meaning that I'm never really sort of quiet for Doctor Who content or Doctor Who media to of course experience, because there's so much other stuff to actually enjoy. However, I do understand where the anger does come from when it comes to not having a series this year. Of course, this does give the BBC an opportunity to polish up the scripts for Series 12, and hopefully we will see more consistency in the next season. We will see an improved version of the 13th Doctor that fixes the flaws that quite a lot of people have picked up on throughout this series, and hopefully, especially the episodes as written by Chris Chibnall, will in fact be a little bit better compared to the ones that we have seen throughout Series 11. Of course, indeed to an extent, with the New Year's Day special being Resolution, which of course I suppose we may as well get on to now. So first off, and as always with these Series 11 episode reviews, I am of course going to start by taking a look at the production side of this story. Of course, it was written by Chris Chibnall, the Series 11 head writer. He has written the early episodes in Series 11 as well as the series finale, and I think that it is fair to say that I have not been particularly too impressed with Chris Chibnall so far. I think that some episodes have been good and have showed potential, but also at the same time with his writing, it does seem to be very different to that of Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat. And if anything, it just seems to be a little bit boring in some places, and I was really interested to see how he was going to tackle the Daleks, or at least a Dalek in this story, because it is the first ever reoccurring villain that we have actually seen him use with the 13th Doctor so far. Now we'll get onto that in a little bit, and I think that what would be fair to state early on in this review is I think that this is possibly one of his best actual contributions to the 13th Doctor so far, along with The Woman Who Fell to Earth. At the end of the day, so far, we don't really have too many standout episodes from him, and the majority of the highlights from Series 11 have in fact came from the guest writers, at least in my opinion. Of course, this episode was directed by Wayne Yip, who did also direct, I do believe, an episode of Class. Particularly remember that episode, but his name does in fact ring a bell, and much like with Jamie Childs in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, his directing style is very contemporary, very modern. I think that regardless of the quality of the script of this episode, I think it will be fair to state that this story looked brilliant. The CGI was generally quite nice, the explosions and practical effects were also quite lovely, and the cinematography looked like something that could be compared to other high-budget shows that are seen on Netflix, such as Black Mirror, such as Game of Thrones, and other popular TV shows that are in fact in the media at the minute. And I think that is certainly something that is an overall compliment of Series 11 so far. The script editor, much like through all of Series 11, was Fiona McAllister, and personally I think that she might need to up her game in Series 12, or maybe even get another script editor, simply because I think that a lot of the scripts are almost feeling like early drafts of stories, and they just need a few edits here and there to make them a little bit more exciting and engaging. Some scenes need to go on for a little bit longer, and others need to be trimmed down a little bit as well, and timekeeping does seem to be a little bit of an issue for this series. Of course, this episode was produced by Nikki Wilson. The executive producers were Chris Chibnall, Matt Struvens and Sam Hoyle, and the incidental music was of course composed by Segan Akinola. And once again, similar compliments for other Segan compositions. This series, really nice, really new, a great breath of fresh air. Nothing particularly too standout for this story. I was expecting a new composition for the Daleks, I must admit. I was expecting something on the same lines as Murray Gold's music. I just want something that is almost a hark back to that. I was a little bit let down that we didn't have that within the actual story, but no doubt when we see a Dalek story with more Daleks in, we'll no doubt see a new composition for the Daleks. It is a lot more atmospheric and kind of the Dalek music that we are used to so far with the new series. But other than that, some really nice music from him, and that is generally it for the production. It did look lovely, and it's just a shame that some elements of the script didn't necessarily live up to that. And now moving on to the characters that are seen throughout this story, starting off with the most important of them all. It is of course the 13th Doctor herself, Jodie Whittaker, that is nicely displayed here on my rather relevant resolution mug. Now this story, I'm going to keep my opinion of the 13th Doctor quite brief, because I think that this story was probably one of her best so far. I think certainly under the writing of Chibnall, it feels like she actually is getting into her stride a bit more now. She did seem a little bit more engaging, and some of those more cringy moments do seem to be getting toned down a little bit. I think that she is a little bit too over-exaggerated with the way that she makes her facial expressions. It does seem incredibly comedic and unusual and a little bit off-putting to some extent in some scenes throughout the episode. But I do think that some of the moments throughout this story were quite nice. I loved her interaction with Ryan's actual birth father, saying immediately you weren't at the sort of funeral of Grace in the early half of the series. I loved that because it showed that she, one, cares for Ryan, but also at the same time she kind of has different approaches to social situations that we have also seen throughout Series 11 so far. There isn't particularly the way that a normal human would handle a situation, and I do like Jodie. I think that she's so far doing an alright job, but I kind of feel, because she is the first female Doctor, maybe I am expecting a bit too much. Maybe I'm looking into it a bit too much, and maybe I'm just wanting her Doctor to be a bit more louder and a bit more creating her own personality, because so far at the minute I'm just sort of seeing a mishmash between the 11th Doctor and 10th Doctor. We have the serious moments in there, but we also have those really quirky and over-the-top moments in there as well, and I think that Series 12 really needs to develop her character a lot more, and she needs to have a toned down personality that is her, not borrowing off other characters or other Doctors. She needs to be unique in her own right. And then moving on to the Tardis team for this episode, incredibly quickly, because we have three of them as per usual. Bradley Walsh, who plays Graham O'Brien. Once again, he kind of took a back seat for this story because the Doctor literally forgot to actually take him with her in the later act of this episode, which I don't blame her, to be honest, because there is that many of them to actually keep track of now. It is literally trying to look after a litter of puppies. It's virtually impossible. And I think that Graham O'Brien, he didn't have too much. I liked his interactions between Ryan, and especially the way that he was trying to protect Ryan in the early half of this episode. But yeah, there wasn't really too much about him that I can really comment on and say it was really standout or good. I just thought he was nice. As per usual, Bradley Walsh did a nice job, and Graham is a nice character. He is by far my favourite companion from the Tardis team. Then we have Mandip Gill, who plays Yasmin Khan, who has had a bumpy ride so far in my reviews, I think that is fair to say, simply because she's not had too much to do. And once again, the same applies for this story. Now, I'd just like to make it very clear that I have absolutely nothing against Mandip. She seems lovely, she seems like an actress with a lot of potential, but she is suffering at the minute, arguably the most out of all of the companions, because there is that many of them, and she just doesn't have anything to do. She can't stand out from the rest because her personality hasn't been developed, and I just want to see throughout series 12 give a reason for me to like her, because at the minute there are glimmers of hope with her character, but that is just toned out by absolutely everybody else throughout these stories. And yet I don't really have anything else to say about her, simply because she didn't have much to do. The most annoying part was she is back in Sheffield for this episode. We even have the use of a police car and the local police force. She is a policewoman, as we've seen in The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Therefore, it would have been lovely to see a return to that career path, and maybe see her actually having some involvement with the police, and as I say, seeing her character be a little bit more strong, and actually once again give me a reason to like her as a character. Then we have Ryan Sinclair, as played by Tosin Cole. Of course, we also have the return of his father in this episode, which is something that was referenced many times throughout Series 11. It was almost like the unofficial plot arc for that series. And yeah, he did have a few nice moments, once again, mainly a relationship development between him and his actual birth father, which I honestly think wasn't particularly relevant for this story. I think that it was quite a bad decision, if anything, to actually have the return of the Daleks and bringing in Ryan's birth father in the same story, because this episode should have been completely dedicated to that Dalek plot. It should have been the 13th Doctor facing off against this Dalek, and not the relationship between Ryan and his father, because to be quite honest, I don't care. I don't care about his relationship with his father. I already know enough about his father to actually not like him as a person, and I've not even seen him on screen up until this point. And also, I've kind of seen throughout Series 11 that Ryan can actually get away with his father not being in his life. He has found Graham now, and Graham is a figure that is almost a father figure in his life. He has now admitted to him that he loves him, and he is his granddad, and he thinks very much of him, and their relationship is very much now a tighter bond. And I just think that bringing his actual birth father into the mix is just a little bit unnecessary, and also at the same time, once again, it just gives another character that arguably we're going to need to return to at some point, which definitely at this point of already having 3 companions, we do not need another character to actually care about or have within the series. And of course, what is Chris Chibnall's way of approaching the situation of having too many companions? Well, what we're going to do for this story is bring on 2 companions for the episode, bringing the grand total of this Tardis team up to 6 people, not including the Doctor herself, which is just plain ridiculous. Even my camera can't cope with how many characters we actually have in this episode. It literally just cut out on me, so yeah, thank you, camera, for that. We are 5 minutes later after emptying the memory card completely. So yeah, moving on to the first of the companions for this episode, we have Charlotte Ritchie, who plays Lynn. Now, I've seen Charlotte Ritchie in a few things in the past. I've wanted her to be in Doctor Who for quite a while, and yeah, I'm quite disappointed that she's in this episode, but not as a companion that is actually going to come aboard the TARDIS, because I think that she's a very strong actress. She has a lot of potential to actually offer to Doctor Who. I've seen her in a few things in the past, one of which was a thing I think on BBC 3. It was a comedy series, I think, called Siblings, and it was basically her and her brother living in a flat or something like that. It's been quite a long time since I've last watched it, but she was really fun in that series. She was a really quirky character, very warm, very lovable, and I kind of feel like in this episode we have something similar from her. She's of course a character that has a love interest, which I will get on to in a little bit, but I did like her, and I think that the most brilliant part about her character is she has this lovely warm side, but also at the same time as Charlotte Ritchie can in fact twist that round completely and actually offer some really twisted and possessed scenes when she's under control of the Dalek, and I would have loved to actually see the more badass version of Lynn actually come out of her shell a bit more, and I think that she was just generally really well acted throughout this episode, really enjoyable, and if we didn't have 3 companions already, I would have willingly liked her to be a companion in Series 12, but hey, maybe another year, maybe the Doctor can come back and see her again, who knows. And then we move on to the love interest, who is of course Mitch, who's played by Nikesh Patel. Once again, a very similar thing to Charlotte Ritchie as Lynn, where I love the fact that he had a personal involvement in the actual story, the fact that he has been educated in archaeology. It means that generally he can give something to the audience that is actually a contribution to the narrative. He can deliver some of the points of the story that might be a little bit hard to understand, such as the backstory of the whole war and battle and the Dalek being separated. I love the idea of the narration both at the end and the start of the episode. It actually put me in the mindset of Dr. Puppet almost, and the narration that is done in that series. The character was nice once again, he was interesting, and I like the fact that he could actually help the Doctor throughout this episode as well. If anything, he actually offered more help in this episode than the actual companions did, which is just ridiculous, isn't it really? It's just the companions should be helping out, they should be doing stuff, they should be making their presence known, yet they aren't. The 13th Doctor is still very much kind of just another member of the gang with her fam of companions, and nobody is taking the lead, and I want to see more leadership, I want to see more challenges for these companions, because at the end of the day, Ryan could have died in the final act of the story by trying to save his father, and I wouldn't have really cared, to be quite honest, because I just think that even though he's one of the characters that's had the most development along with Graham, I'm just yet to have a personal actual liking to them. The only one that I do even like slightly is Graham, and that's it. And then the final credit that I'm of course going to give for the cast for this episode is Nicholas Briggs as the Daleks, or the Reconnaissance Dalek, the one Dalek that we actually see throughout this episode. And he was really good, he was experimental, he was different. I actually was very much in the mindset for this episode of thinking of a Big Finish Dalek, because especially that early moment in the first reveal scene for this story where you find out that the mutant is on Lynn's back, where he actually takes over her body and you have that almost humanoid Dalek sounding voice. It very much sounded like a Big Finish Dalek, and to be honest, if you just gave me that sound clip and asked me to identify if it was from a Big Finish story or a TV episode, I probably would have picked Big Finish, because it seems a lot more experimental and a lot different, and it's nice to see that those more personalised, interesting Daleks are actually creeping into the new series of Doctor Who on TV, very much like the Daleks that we've seen in the 8th Doctor box set so far, that of course have more of a personality, such as say the Dalek Time Controller, I think it was called, from Dark Eyes. And then also there is this rather humanoid, interesting scientist Dalek in the War Doctor series as well, that once again very much reminded me of that Dalek in this story. And that is all the characters that I'm going to mention in this review, simply because there's too many of them, and I can't be arsed talking about any more of them, and I can't really remember anybody else either. So now moving on to the actual narrative of the episode itself. It was a little bit of an unusual one, simply because we had that idea of the Dalek story, and then that had the balancing out script narrative of the father relationship between the birth father of Ryan, and of course him coming back into Ryan's life. And I think that that was a little bit of a mistake. As I say, I think that generally this episode should have focused on the Dalek a little bit more, especially because it is the first ever reoccurring villain that we have seen the 13th Doctor face. And I think that this episode, as I say, it did look very cinematic and it did feel very cinematic, but the pacing was just a little bit off. I think that it started very nice. I love the establishing scenes of having the archaeological dig, and I love the backstory of the battle that happened with the different flashbacks to the different people from different cultures, actually hiding the different parts of the Dalek at different points on the Earth. I thought that was very nice and lovely. I wasn't too sure about the font that was used on the location text though. I thought it did look quite tacky. However, it didn't really appear for too much of the actual episode itself, therefore it doesn't really bother me that much. It just looked a little bit weird. But yeah, actually discussing the Dalek itself, because it is the most important episode point for me for the actual narrative, I think, and that's no doubt what you're all here for. If you're here for anything, it's probably basically to get my opinion of the spare parts Dalek, as people call it. I think it should have another name. Like Dalek Rusty has his own name, I think that this one should have its own as well, because it kind of deserves it. It is its own character, and it is not the brand new design of Dalek. A lot of people have been complaining, saying they don't like it. The 2005 bronze ones are better. And I can remember I put up something on Twitter before this episode aired, saying that considering we've not seen visually the Daleks in any promotional material, I was expecting a new design of Dalek, and that is very much what we got in this episode, and I'm glad that we got it. However, the actual design itself is very odd. We are never going to see it again, and it's basically a Dalek cobbled together out of bits and pieces, and I just love that. I love the idea of the Dalek basically doing as much as it could in order to survive and get back to the Dalek fleet. Once again, very much putting me in the mindset of a Dalek story set within the Time War, and having a Dalek at all costs wanting to survive and get back to Skaro. And in fact, there is an episode in Unit the New series that involved just one Dalek, and it didn't have a gun. I don't think it even had an eye stalk, and it didn't have a manipulator arm either. It was completely defenseless, and basically it still managed to completely control the entirety of Unit because of the way that it was incredibly manipulative. And it would have been nice to maybe see a lot of that throughout this episode. It would have been nice to see it manipulating people a bit more, but also at the same time, what I got from this story was, although this Dalek was falling apart, it was on its last legs. It was literally made out of a dustbin. I love the fact it was powerful. I thought that the death count for this story was incredibly high, and that was very good. It showed that the Dalek was an actual threat, and undeniably this is the most dangerous threat that the 13th Doctor has faced so far, but that really doesn't say much considering the monsters and the villains that we got in Series 11 that were quite honestly some of the weirdest and mediocre bunch of villains that we've seen in Doctor Who for a very long time. They just didn't have any force behind them or any grandiose plan that actually made them feel like a threat. This story, of course, did in fact have that. You had the Daleks slaughtering people, you had it taking over the internet in order to get information, much like in Series 1's Dalek episode, and then you had it invading GCHQ and actually killing people in there as well. I loved that because it did feel like an actual danger. The one thing that I didn't like about the Dalek, after originally not liking the design, honestly on the first airing, I really hated the design. I actually thought when we first had the outline of it, I thought that was going to be the new version of Dalek. I honestly did. And then of course as the script went on, you realised this is just going to be a temporary one. It's not going to be a new design. That is quite obvious. And I think that the one issue was that interaction between the 13th Doctor and the Dalek. I was expecting a lot more, especially that moment where the Dalek actually realises who she is and her identity, and of course the fact that she is the Doctor, and then the Dalek decides to of course shoot her. I thought that that scene just should have had more suspense behind it, and I think that the 13th Doctor, especially the character that we have seen so far, would have been very nervous to actually encounter the Daleks again, because she doesn't seem to be a Doctor that is actually bold and can stand up for herself, and I think that the Doctor that was seen facing this Dalek was a little bit different. I like the fact that she wanted to face the Dalek by herself and not with her companions, simply because I wanted a scene of the Doctor interacting with the Dalek without all 67,000 of the companions in the background basically just loitering and contributing absolutely nothing to the episode, much like how Series 11 pretty much played out in its entirety. So I do think that the actual introduction of this new Dalek did have its benefits, but at the same time, that moment where she says, "Mate, I'm the Doctor," and she just put her hands up, I just didn't feel the same threat that I would have felt behind, say, even the 11th Doctor or 12th Doctor delivering that line. It just didn't have suspense, and I wanted to see this Doctor really have a moment. I wanted her to have a speech. I wanted her to have the moment where I actually finally go, she's the Doctor, and she's brilliant. Yeah, I've still not had that. But on the plus side, as I say, this episode is certainly probably one of the best acting for Jodie Whittaker so far as 13, meaning that I can kind of only go into series 12 with actual hope that she is going to improve even more. But I think that for her first story with the Daleks, it was still nice, it was enjoyable, and it was kind of different and unique. I think that if anything, I can praise Chibnall for actually going off the cards a little bit in the standard story structure and just doing something that wasn't an average Dalek comes to Earth story, Dalek wants to invade, Dalek kills people, Dalek is defeated. At the end of the day, yes, it was kind of like that, but the actual context of having a Dalek slowly rebuilding itself from virtually nothing was interesting and entertaining and kind of new for the TV standard of things. One of the benefits of having a few extra minutes to play with in this story was, of course, seeing the TARDIS console room a little bit more, something of which that we have not seen once again throughout most of the episodes in Series 11. It has virtually been somewhere to just be at the start of the story, and then we wouldn't see it for the rest of the episode. It was nice to have the TARDIS having a bit more involvement, showing off the new set a little bit more. However, I think I'm kind of coming to the conclusion that I don't particularly like this TARDIS console room too much. I love the idea of it being more alien. It does feel very alien. However, at the same time, it does feel a little bit unconventional. And I don't know about you, it's my personal opinion, but I like the more conventional 60s style TARDISes. I love the original one where Hartnell literally used to write on little notes where what buttons did certain things. And I like the fact that the 12th Doctor one was once again harking back to that design. It felt like a spaceship, it felt like a machine. And to be quite honest, regardless of what the 13th Doctor's TARDIS design was actually going to be, it had quite a hard job to follow on, because the 12th and sort of 11th Doctor towards the end of his era TARDIS is in fact my favourite of new series Doctor Who, and this one is just quite different from that. It is very alien and it just seems a bit claustrophobic, and I really hate these things as well. I don't know what they are, like the things that go up with the rotor and at the side of the TARDIS, they just look a bit odd and a bit cheap, and yeah, I think that maybe it would be nice to see the lighting changed a little bit throughout the next series, much like how we had between the end of the 11th Doctor era and into the 12th Doctor's. Maybe as she changes persona, she maybe has a slight change in the decor a little bit. That would be quite nice. And getting on to the elephant in the room that sent Twitter into an absolute frenzy, it is of course the reference to UNIT, which originally I wasn't really very happy about it either. The whole idea of UNIT basically being sort of suspended, I think due to funding being withdrawn. I do believe it was meant to be a dig at Brexit or something like that. Yes, it is 2019 and we are still going on about Brexit, and it's just annoying the hell out of people and me. And I just think that when we watch dramas and when we watch entertainment on TV, if it's not the news, I don't want to be reminded of current political affairs. I get it being referenced every so often, but just references like this that seemed a little bit unnecessary, especially in the context of UNIT. Of course, it is pretty much the backbone of the 3rd Doctor era. It is a very big part of Doctor Who history. It was lovely to see a reference to Kate Stewart, and part of me did question, would this story have actually had any improvement if UNIT was actually involved within the episode and you've seen the 13th Doctor interacting with Kate Stewart and Osgood, even though I think that they weren't necessarily that engaging within the series itself. Or maybe be really interesting and bring on the actual UNIT Big Finish team in and bring James Joyce and Roman Tickram, and that would be good, wouldn't it? And then you could have them all in there and have a little bit of a link to the Big Finish series. That would be quite cool. But instead we have activities being suspended, which I did find it very unusual. A little bit of a crowbarred in element as well. I don't know if they're just using it as a joke, but I did find it quite odd that in the early half of the story where you had the Dalek using Lynn and she was using the laptop to try and hack into security or whatever, one of the sources of information or the things that she was hacking into was the Black Archive, which is of course something that is run by UNIT. And I was kind of questioning, if UNIT was suspended and no longer in operation, why would the Black Archive still exist as a source of information? It would kind of seem something that would be suspended along with UNIT itself. And also the woman on the phone at the call centre scene as well, she mentioned Earth not being invaded, of course, in quite a while, which I think, I'm trying to think back to the last invasion, it probably would have been the end of Series 8, the Dark Water thing, where the Cybermen were flying out of St. Paul's. I mean, that was kind of an invasion, and that would have only been, like, less than 5 years ago in the grand scheme of things, so I don't think that's necessarily too long to go. All the aliens aren't really bothered about Earth anymore. Probably come back and blow us up at some point, but we've not got UNIT anymore to kind of help us. I just think it's a little bit odd, and I don't know why they're using it. Maybe it's a plot point in Series 12, or maybe it's just a reference that was unnecessary, but at the end of the day, UNIT has always been inconsistent throughout Doctor Who. It has gone from a team of army people to useless scientists to people that are experienced in scientific alien discovery. It's just a mental thing. We've had many different phases with them, and UNIT will be back. It will never be dead, and Big Finish do many episodes with them anyway, so I don't really mind. It's not much of an issue. It's just a bit odd that they decided to include it, especially after making the statement that they weren't going to reference many things in Series 11 in order to not alienate the new audience, which I just think we've had quite a lot of that this series. We've had UNIT, of course the obscure references to Boomtown and Margaret Blame, the Egg, and a few other things in there as well that those new, of course that new audience wouldn't actually understand, but you know, whatever floats Chibnall's boat. I've kind of gave up slightly by this point, to be quite honest. And one final little credit that I really did like, and a lot of people did in fact pick up on it, is when the Dalek actually shot people. I loved the actual atmosphere behind that, because it actually felt like, although it wasn't, it felt like the camera was actually shuddering because of the sheer power of the Dalek actually killing people. As I was saying earlier, the Dalek in this story, although it was literally made out of spare parts, it felt like a force to be reckoned with, because it was just killing left, right and centre. It wiped out a tank that was absolutely brilliant, looked very powerful and very cool. And I love the fact that when it shot people, we had the exposure of the skeleton, but we also had the kind of opposite, I can't remember what they actually call it, but kind of the classic effect that was used in Remembrance of the Daleks, as well as in the classic series. I think it's actually called negative, the negative effect, making all the surrounding area of the body look almost white and vibrant. I thought that was very cool and a nice harkback as well, and considering that we have now seen a new design of Dalek, and we don't need to have the Daleks of course in 2019 because we've already had the episode this year, hopefully when the Daleks next return we see them with a brand new design entirely, even if it's the bronze ones but in the 60s silver and blue or white and gold design. That'll be quite nice. But I want to see the Daleks come back once again, a new fleet that is powerful, a new design, looks cool, and I want to see the Doctor actually really at threat. I want to see some face-to-face moments, because maybe the fact that the Dalek was a reconnaissance Dalek that was kind of literally falling apart, maybe that kind of stopped the Doctor having proper fear behind her voice, because I didn't see it in this story. And maybe when she sees the Daleks again, she realises that the Dalek in this story was a little bit of a close shave. What about when she sees the Daleks next time and it is in fact a whole fleet to contend with? That is it for the Series 11 special resolution as written by Chris Chibnall. Overall, it was a rather nice, entertaining, sort of blockbuster style modern contemporary story, and I think that overall it was an enjoyable episode. I think that on the first watch I was a little bit disappointed by it, and it is nice to see the Daleks actually facing the 13th Doctor. It had some great moments because the Daleks seem powerful. I think that Jodie herself is certainly showing some potential to actually be a decent Doctor in a later series. However, I'm not seeing it quite yet. And the supporting cast for this episode were also very nice, very engaging, and if it wasn't for the very large expanse of Tardis Team that we currently have going on, I would have loved to maybe see them join the Doctor in an adventure or two in Doctor Who Series 12. And I think that certainly when comparing this episode to some of the other contributions by Chibnall in the 13th Doctor era that we've seen so far, this episode was certainly a lot more intriguing, a lot more engaging, and generally a lot more exciting for the audience as well. And hopefully in Series 12 we will once again see a continuation of the positives of this episode, and not necessarily the negatives and the flaws that we have seen throughout Doctor Who Series 11 over the past few months. And that is that. That brings up to date the final episode for the 13th Doctor from 2018 and 2019. Technically the first year of 13th Doctor adventures if we don't get anything else this year, which I'm pretty sure we are not going to get absolutely anything for the 13th Doctor. And I think that that is going to be it for the 13th Doctor for a little while. Of course, the Series 11 complete box set is coming out in mid-January. I think that I'll probably end up purchasing that, and then literally forgetting that Series 11 actually exists for maybe a few months, and then returning back to it and watching them all again with a fresh set of eyes and actually seeing if this series is any better, or maybe it's just an era of Doctor Who that particularly isn't for me. At the end of the day, we have had 50 plus years of Doctor Who, and not all of it will actually be to my liking, and it will make sense for some eras to be better than others in personal opinion. Therefore, I might just accept that the 13th Doctor isn't for me, but at the minute, I still have hope that in the future, she is going to be a very bright and colourful incarnation of the Doctor. I know that isn't because of the scarf that she did sport for a few scenes throughout the story, although it was quite nice, although we didn't see much of it, which was a shame. So that is that. I hope you have enjoyed this review. What has been your general opinion of the New Year's Day special resolution? Why not comment it in the description below? And now that Series 11 is over, what has been your general opinion of the series? Are you excited to see more Doctor Who in the future? And what is your general opinion of the 13th Doctor? What do you want to see the 13th Doctor do next? Where do you want to see her go? What aliens do you want her to face? Or maybe even what historical settings do you want her to visit next? We have so many things to actually see the 13th Doctor do over the coming years. As always, much like how the Series 11 slogan did of course suggest, the universe is calling. And on that note, I hope you've enjoyed this review, hope you've had a lovely new year, and I guess I'll see you all in more Doctor Who content in the near future, as well as throughout 2019. Bye for now.